for surveys. And so part of the question was, hey, could we actually see the surveys? And then the surveys came back, and a survey was like 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with 10 questions that anyone's child in junior high could have put together, or AI could have done for free. $830 million. So that's one that we've stopped. And that contract was going out after you were inaugurated, sir. So it was
so
jumping.
It's a pure fraud.
Yeah.
It's a fraud. But we've had many fraudulent contracts that were caught by the work that Elon and his people are doing, and working with our people. It's been brought to light. The fraud, not just waste and abuse, the fraud has been incredible. You mentioned one, Madam Secretary.
Well, yes, sir. Well, let me just add to that, and thank you. We just had a wonderful cabinet meeting, all aligned on certainly the effort to realign the government. But even at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, we've canceled a $300,000 contract educating on food justice for queer and transgender farmers in San Francisco. A similar contract we canceled in New York, again, educating transgender and queer farmers on food justice and food equality. I'm not even sure what that means, but apparently the last administration wanted to put our taxpayer dollars towards that. We canceled a $600,000 contract out of Louisiana that was studying the menstrual cycles of transgender men, a $600,000 contract. We canceled another contract out of a university in the middle of the country that focused on getting more diversity, equity, and inclusion into our pest management industry. Again, these are nonsensical. It makes zero sense to use taxpayer dollars to fund these. I know these are just a few examples of the hundreds and hundreds that we have found.
Well, a clear case of fraud was with the Small Business Administration, where they were handing out loans, $330 million worth of loans to people under the age of 11. I think the youngest, Kelly, was a 9-month-old who got a $100,000 loan. That's a very precocious baby we're talking about here.
We're tackling the fraud, waste, and abuse in the agency. We've seen, hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud go unprosecuted, so we're taking that on. We have a zero tolerance policy for fraud, and we continue to crack down on it and make sure people are held accountable.
That's amazing. And you have a lot of that. You found far too much of it. It's a pure fraud. We like to use the words waste and abuse because they sort of sound good, but many of these things are pure fraud. Now, there was a contract that you've heard about where Stacey Abrams got $2 billion just before we took over, and it was a rush to get her the money, and that was environmental, and nobody knows what she was doing. But $2 billion. If you got $2 million, that's a lot. If you got 200,000, that's a lot. But this was $2 billion was given. Lee, do you want to talk about that? And the other one that was even worse?
EPA has now canceled over $22 billion worth of contracts. $2 billion going to this NGO that Stacey Abrams was tied to. They received only $100 in 2023. And then the Biden administration gave them $2 billion. The director of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund saw his former employer get $5 billion. So $20 billion went to just 8 NGOs, and they're all pass-throughs. And then they were giving it to other entities, many of them were pass-throughs. And what you have is all these extra middlemen, they're taking their cut. And the taxpayer ends up getting screwed. They're losing out on all this hard-earned money. They can't afford to have the federal government waste. The partnership with DOGE and Elon Musk has been incredible at EPA. Their team is very talented. We wouldn't have been able to do it without them. And of course, this mandate from President Trump to make sure that we identify every last penny, whether we're saving $50,000, $5 million, or $22 billion. We will not rest until every last penny is saved. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to do this for the American public.
Thank you. Great job you're doing. So we have a lot of that. We're getting down to a point we think probably over the next 2 or 3 months we'll be pretty much satisfied with the people that are working hard and want to be members of the administration and our country, really. And they're doing a lot of good people. We have a lot of great people. We want to keep the good ones, and we want to get rid of the ones that don't exist, and we want to get rid of the ones that do exist but don't work. And we have quite a few of them. Would anybody else like to say something before we take some questions from the press, please? Doug Collins.
Yeah, Mr. President, I think one of the things that you've always told me is take care of our veterans, and that's what we're doing at the VA. And one of the things, though, is you also have to know who your employees are. You have to know the very fact of who you are. We're 470,000 roughly when we started this, larger than the active duty Army, when you think about that in the perspective. But however, this is an interesting point. When I first got there and we started looking at this, how you take care of people, we didn't have an HR system that could actually give us a rundown on who actually was working where. That we've had to work with that, working with our VA employees who are DOGE liaisons. We've been able to put together an organizational chart which we can start looking at that. But the interesting part about it is about taking care of veterans, and what you've told me to do is how do we get the people in the right places. And I think when we look at this, GAO has told us we were high risk for years. The previous administration put literally tens of billions of dollars and tens of thousand employees over the last 4 years, and we saw our statistics basically stay the same or go down. Backlogs went up. Maybe the question is not money and employees anymore. Maybe it's the organization and how we effectively deliver for the American people. And that's what we're going to do.
Well said.
And one thing I want to add to it, it is not necessarily a very popular thing to do. You're talking about employment, you're talking about people and the lives of people. And yet, I think the American public understands we're trying to save our country and make our country great again. I mean, you could say it, but we're trying to save our country from this extraordinary thing that was happening. What they were doing to our country was just a horrible thing. And I have no idea how it plays out in the public. I guess you see poll numbers that are very good numbers, but I don't know what that means long term. But it's something that has to be done. If we don't do it, we're not going to have much of a country left, so we have to do it. So we're doing things that I think a lot of presidents wouldn't be inclined to do, but we're doing it to really, I don't want to use cliche. I don't want to say we're doing it to make America great again, because I say that on the campaign trail, but there's really no other words that could express it better than that. We're doing it to help our country, and our country was riddled with fat, like no country probably anywhere in the world, and we're getting rid of the fat. And at the same time, we're going to be bringing in millions of very good, high-paying jobs, and we're going to be taking in a lot of money. Our country's going to be very strong. We've been ripped off by every country in the world, friend and foe. We were taken advantage of like nobody's ever seen. And you saw what happened today with Venezuela. We did something with Venezuela, which is long in the making, and it's very substantial. And we'll be announcing cars very shortly, and we already announced steel, as you know, and aluminum. We'll be announcing pharmaceuticals at some point in the not too distant, because we have to have pharmaceuticals. We don't make pharmaceuticals anymore in our country. And if we have problems like wars or anything else, we need steel, we need pharmaceuticals, we need aluminum, we need a lot of these things that we sort of don't make anymore, and yet we're equipped to do it all. So we'll be announcing some of these things in the very near future, not the long future, the very near future. And it'll bring in billions of dollars, billions and billions, and it'll bring in, maybe more importantly, jobs. It'll protect the jobs we have, and it's going to be really, really quite amazing. Chris,